But gold and silver have been strong, are strong, and that's because somebody is worried about something, whether it's currency debasement or war, bankruptcy, who knows what they're worried about, but somebody's worried about something. Well, I own gold, as you well know. I've never sold any of my gold, which I've had for decades. And if it goes down, I hope I'm smart enough to buy more. If I were buying something today, I would buy silver. I own lots of silver as well. And silver is down 40% or so from its all-time high, while gold is making all-time highs. So if I were buying something today, I would prefer silver. But the real answer to your question is, I'm not the only person who knows that there are problems on the horizon. I mean, the US debt is staggering. If you just look at the numbers, and I'm afraid nobody in Washington looks at the numbers, but they're incomprehensible. They can never be paid. I have young daughters. They're going to have huge problems with the US economy and currency in their lifetimes. It's a good time to be an old American. It's not a good time to be a young American, because young people are going to have lots of problems. I remember, in 1924, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, it's not a typo, 50 years later, Britain was bankrupt, totally bankrupt. The IMF had to help them pay their bills. So this has happened before. I'm not suggesting when the US is going to have those problems, but I know they're coming. I've read enough of history to know that they're coming, and it's not good. But that doesn't mean, Danny, that right now not everybody's having a good time. Nobody sees any problems on the horizon. There's no war, there's no famine, there's nothing coming down the road. But gold and silver have been strong, are strong, and that's because somebody is worried about something, whether it's currency debasement or war, bankruptcy, who knows what they're worried about, but somebody's worried about something. I own both because I know, I mean, I'm an old peasant, and all of us old peasants know you better have some gold and silver in the closet if something goes wrong. And that's why I hope I'm smart enough to never sell my gold or silver. Well, my kids have it someday, and I hope they don't sell it either. But the world does face, I mean, Danny, war, depression, inflation, there are all sorts of things going on out there that could be very, very disruptive. But at the moment, nobody cares, or everybody says they're not so serious. I hope they're not serious. I don't want to have a war. I don't want to have depression. I don't want to have bankruptcy. I don't want any of that stuff. So let's hope the world's going to be okay. Well, they're all interconnected. You look back to previous periods in history, what happened was you had a little war over here that nobody paid much attention to, and then another little war over there. People ignored it, and the next thing you knew, oh my gosh, it's on the evening news, and everybody knows about the big war that's taking place. So no, history would indicate that the world is sliding towards more war and bigger wars. So, Danny, be worried. I'm worried anyway, because I wish human beings were smart enough to avoid war. But human beings have been having wars for hundreds of years. No matter how smart human beings are, and no matter how much somebody can sit down and say, this is a stupid war, they all say, yeah, it's a stupid war. It'll be over in 6 months. And it never is. So be worried. The US dollar is already being undermined. If you look at the numbers, when I look at the numbers, just the numbers for this year alone, they're staggering, absolutely stunning how high the debt is and how high it's going. And I know it can never be paid off. The British went, 100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. I mean, history shows this is happening to us. And that means that the US dollar is going to come under serious pressure sometime in your lifetime, my lifetime. And we're going to have more and more currency crises. And my problem is, well, first of all, I own a lot of US dollars at the moment. You're probably going to say, well, why do you own the dollars after what you just said? And I will, because many people will look for a safe haven during a crisis, and they think for historic reasons that the dollar is a safe haven. It's not, but people think it is. I hope that I'm smart enough that when it goes up a lot, that I'll sell it. Your question now should be, well, where will you put your money? And I don't have an answer. I cannot find a new competing currency for the US dollar. All the ones that you would think would be logical have many basic flaws. So you and I and the world is going to have more serious problems in the next 2 or 3 years. Be worried. Well, I own both. I'm not as smart as the rest of the world, but I own both of those things you talked about. I also own silver. If either of them go down, I hope I'm smart enough to buy more. But when the next serious problem comes, and it looks more and more likely in the near future, when I say the near future, the next year or two, when that happens, everybody historically has fled to gold, silver, dollars. But if the dollar goes very high this time, I hope I'm smart enough to sell it, because I don't see any solution to the problems of the US dollar longer term. And when I say longer term, I'm talking about 2 or 3 years. For some reason, the US stock market is making all-time highs, even though the US potentially has problems. So yes, that's what people are doing, but that's part of the flight to the US dollar. If you're going to buy US dollars, you got to own something. And many people consider stocks, bonds, whatever, currencies, the safe haven. I know it's not, but as long as people think it is, it is. Well, most of these things do happen slowly and then all at once, and everybody says, oh my gosh, how can you possibly own pounds, British pounds, in the last crisis? And many people did, but then it became impossible to own British pounds. I mean, I can remember friends who want to go to Europe even, they couldn't take more than 50 pounds to go on an international trip because things were so serious. That has always happened during currency crises as countries have lost their currency status. And I repeat, I look at the numbers and I am stunned at the US situation, and I don't like it. I'm an American citizen. My kids are American citizens. But unfortunately, nobody, I mean, you and I are talking about it. That's because I keep on changing the subject, but most people in America could care less. And Washington says, oh, don't worry, we'll be okay, we're America. Well, you say it's a slow burn. It is a slow burn, but it's been going on, I guess, technically since about the 1980s. America became a debtor nation for the first time. So for 30 or 40 years, America has been a debtor nation, and it's getting worse every day because we keep spending money we don't have. So yes, it has been a slow burn, 30 or 40 years. But, Danny, these things come to an end. They always have. And then, as you point out, suddenly everybody says, oh my gosh, do you know that America's in debt? You know, America has huge debt. And they'll all be shouting at each other. How did this happen? Who did it? You did it. Daddy did it. Somebody did it, you know. These people in Washington did it. No, the people in Washington, no, it's not us. It's not us. It's the foreigners. It's all because of the foreigners. Throughout history, when a country has problems, the first thing the government does is blame the foreigners, no matter what it is, no matter where it is. Nobody wants to say, oh, yes, we made a mistake. We fouled things up. We have horrible problems now. No. They say, the foreigners, it's those horrible, evil foreigners. That's the problem. And then they make even more stupid laws. They put on exchange controls. They do everything to make it worse. No, you should be worried. As recently as 1987, the U.S. was a creditor nation.
Mm-hmm.
That's less than 40 years ago. And since then, we have been spending as fast as we can, spending money we don't have. Somebody's been doing it. So I can add, I can subtract. So I know this does not have a good ending. For a long time, people in Washington have been making these mistakes. We have elected them. We, in our wisdom, have elected them. But back to the point, my point anyway, the U.S. is now a debtor nation. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. And if you can add and subtract, you will see this cannot continue. The British did it, and in 50 years they were bankrupt. Many countries in history have done it. It has never ended well. Printing money, spending money, borrowing money has never ended well. I wish I could say, hooray, we don't have to worry. We have politicians in Washington. That's why we should worry, because they don't care about you and me, Danny. They don't care about our children. They care about keeping their job. And the way they keep their job is to spend money. You want a new park in your town, Danny? Okay, we'll give you a new park. You want new anything? Okay, Danny, we'll give it to you. Vote for me. Well, if you, by Eastern, you mean Asia. I mean, whether we like it or not, Asia has been rising for a few years now. The creditor nations are in Asia. Asia, though, is building up its own debt now, too. I mean, Japan, you look at Japan, it is staggering. I mean, I love Japan. It's a fantastic country, but it is staggering to me how much debt they have built up. And Danny, the population in Japan has been declining for 15 years. I mean, listen, I am not optimistic about the American stock market. I guess I've made that clear. I don't like what I see happening. Stocks are making all-time highs in most of the world, by the way. Nearly everywhere, stocks are making all-time highs. Even China now has started booming. So, Danny, when everybody's making all-time highs and everybody's happy, it has usually been a signal that people should be worried and cautious. So I would just suggest to people, you can do what you want, and maybe everything is okay, and maybe you're going to make a fortune in the investment markets. But historically, that has been a time to be worried and ask questions. I urge you to be worried and ask questions.